Okay, so the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna put on these little handles here. So let's do that. Alt-A, deselect, Shift-A, we're gonna add a mesh cube. I'm gonna back out just a little bit so we can see what's going on here. Let's scale this down quite a bit. I'm gonna bring it up towards where we're working. Let's get right in here and see what's happening. Okay, so I'm gonna scale it a little more, something like that, and then we're gonna scale along the Y, so SY, and we're going to make this a little bit longer, something like that. Probably scale down just a little more, maybe a little more SY to scale it out. That looks pretty good. I'm going to move it off to the side here now, and let's get into editing. So let's tab into edit mode, and then let's get rid of this back face. So I'm going to go into face select. We don't need this face, so if we hit X, we can delete that face. All right, cool. Now I'm going to come up here to the front, grab this face, and then I'm going to extrude out on the Y. So EY, bring it out slightly, and then we're going to scale it up a little bit. EY again to bring it out just a little more. Let's scale that up a bit. EY to bring that out just a little more. EY to bring it out just a little more here. We'll begin scaling it down now. And then one more time, EY to bring this out just a little bit, and then let's scale it down. Okay, that looks pretty fair. Okay, so before I do anything else, I'm going to hit Tab, Control A, just to make sure its scale is applied. I've had issues with this in practice, so tab back in, and then let's unwrap it. So I'm going to go into Edge Select mode. I'm going to grab this edge, and I'm going to come forward all the way to the end here, Control left click to catch that whole thing, right click, and then mark seams. And then I also want this whole front here, so we'll just individually hold down the Shift key and left click and select all those, right click, and we'll mark those seams as well. Okay, and so let's give this a subdivision surface modifier real quick. Come over here to our control panel, hit the wrench, add a modifier, Sub-D, and we're only going to give it a viewport of 1 because we're trying to keep this kind of low poly. Okay, so let's unwrap this real quick. Let's hit A, U, and unwrap. And this is what we get. It's a little bit odd, but it works for this application, so I'm just going to leave it. And then let's go into here and refine this just a little bit by hitting Control R. We'll make a new edge loop. We'll left click. We'll drag it towards the front here just to sharpen this part up here. And that looks pretty good. Okay, now if we hit Tab, go into Object Mode, and then right-click, Shade Smooth, it starts to look pretty smooth. And then if we come down here into our control panel, Auto Smooth, we'll see that some of those facets come back. We have to kick this up quite a bit. I think we have to take it over 90. It looks like over 45 will work perfect. Okay, cool, so there we have it. Now let's Tab, A to select the entire thing, and we'll scale in edit mode. Let's bring this knob down. The knobs on this picture here are pretty long. I think they'd get in the way of your legs and stuff, so I'm not going to make them that big. All right, so let's grab it and just pull it right into our object. Into this hex bolt is what I mean by object. I always just say object. Sorry if that's irritating. All right, here we go. I'm going to center it up, and that looks pretty good. Let's hit Tab to go into object mode, 7 on our numpad to go into top view, and let me bring this back into view. And then let's set our pivot point back to the 3D cursor. And then let's duplicate by hitting Shift D, left clicking, and then let's RZ, and let's bring this around. I'm only going to add 3, and I'm going to put them on these points here, so something like that. Shift D, left click, RZ to bring this around, and let's put it on this point right over here, something like so. All right, cool, that looks pretty fair. All right, let's take a look at the scale of those. Those look about right to me, and our stool is looking pretty good. All right, so let's bring this back up. Okay, so Alt-A to deselect everything. So the next thing that we're going to add in is On all these stools here, you can't really see it in this picture because it's a real low res image. This is usually a screw, a big, like an Acme thread screw, all thread, or a big bolt, or whatever you want to call it. So let's model that. I'm going to cheat just a little bit on that part, and we're just going to use an add-on from Blender. So let's check out how we get that add-on first if you don't have it. So if we go up here to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, we go right up here and search. We're going to search Extra Mesh Objects, and then you can see that it's clicked. That's the one I believe you have to have there. And then we can just, mine's already there, put a click in the box and check it. Now it might also be, let me check real quick just to make sure, B-O-L-T. Actually, this is the one you want right here, Add Mesh Bolt Factory. So just punch in Bolt and Add Mesh Bolt Factory, put a check in the box, and call it good. All right, we're out. Okay, so now that we have nothing selected, we can hit Shift-A, and now we can add a mesh, and we can go all the way down to the bottom, and we get this bolt. If we click it, we get a giant bolt. Two things I want to change on this. One is this shank length. So let's make the shank a lot longer. Okay, and it doesn't really matter because we're just going to cut all that off anyways. And the second one is the thread length. So let's just kick that up quite a bit. I'm going to back out real quick just to see it a little more. It's giant. And let's take the thread length up to, say, I don't know, 16 or so. That should be plenty. Okay, let's hit 1 on the numpad, and we'll see it from the front. And if I just click on the bolt, that whole thing will go away. I want to go into, let me get a better view here, just a second. Bring this in like so. I want to be in front view, 1 on the numpad, tab into edit mode. I want to be in vertex select mode, and then I want to hit Alt A to deselect everything, the Z key to go into wireframe, and then we're going to select all of these vertices. When you're in wireframe, it allows you to select everything all the way through the mesh all in one stroke, so it's pretty nice. I'm going to hit the C key for the circle select, and we're just going to paint over all of these. Sometimes that's called paint select as well. And it got all of the vertices front and back here, so we can just hit X and delete those vertices. I'm going to come down to the bottom. We'll hit the Z key to go back into solid. I'm going to go into face mode, and then I'm going to cant this so we can see the bottom. And then I'm going to hit C select again, and we're just going to select all of these faces on the bottom. And I can't really see if I got them all. I think there's one more there that I need, and it really doesn't even matter. But so now we can hit X and delete faces. Okay, one last piece of business on this bolt is unwrapping. So I'm going to go all the way up to the top, and I'm going to just pick a line, get in here close enough to see it, and we got to select from the top. Oh, we're in face select. We need to be in edge mode, edge select. Select this top one, and then we can just come down, Control select, and work our way down. Control left click, and it'll get everything in a straight line between the last ones we picked. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, somewhere in here, Control left click again. And then finally we have to get all the way to the bottom, and we can Control left click, and now we have them all. So now that we have that whole entire edge selected, as you can see, we can right click and mark the seam. Now if we hit A, U, unwrap. This is the unwrap we get. Now it's a little messy. There's a lot of vertices here. You might be able to make this a little more low res. I like the look of the thread, so here's where we're going to spend some geometry. So I'm going to go with this. This is going to be perfectly adequate for this unwrap. All right, so let's hit tab to go into object mode, right click, and shade smooth. I'm not going to do anything over here. I'm going to turn this auto smooth on, but I don't have to change anything there. And you can see we have a nice smooth thread form. All right, cool. I'm going to hit tab, make sure everything's selected, and we're going to scale in edit mode. And we got to scale this way down. So let me get back to our scene. Like so. And then let's scale it some more. And then I'm actually going to tab into object mode, right click, set the origin to the geometry. And then that'll allow me to use my gizmo here to move this up. Something like so. And then, of course, we still have our 3D cursor as our pivot point, let's go back to individual origins, and then you'll see that the gizmo moves to the center of the bolt or the screw thread. All right, so I'm going to scale it again. I'm going to hit tab first to go into object or edit mode. Scale this down just a little bit more, something like that. And then we're going to bring this up like so. All right, cool. That looks pretty good. It's a little bit beefy, but that's okay. We'd want a strong thread here so that people don't just snap it off when they're drinking beer and carousing at the bar. Okay, I'm going to hit tab, and we're done with that part. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to hit Alt-A to deselect. So the next thing we need is a bracket to mount the actual seat on. So let's hit Shift-A. I'm going to add a mesh circle, and then I'm going to tab into edit mode. I like to be in vertex mode when I'm working with the circle. I'm going to back up just a bit. Let's bring this up to the top here, and we can see it's way too big. So we'll scale it in. And I'm going to start it probably right about here. Let's bring it down just a little bit. Let's move these over so we can get a little better view. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that our 3D cursor is not the pivot point, that it individual origins, which it is. And then I'm going to hit ES and bring this in just a little bit. And then I'm going to pull this down using the Z-axis arrow. And then ES again, just to bring this in, something like that. And then I'm going to hit fill, just to fill it in. Now we could leave this as kind of a bowl-shaped cup, but I had troubles with the normals going into Substance Painter. By the way, if you're in Substance Painter and you see one of your parts of your model seems to look like it's see-through or you can't see it correctly, that means that the normals haven't been calculated correctly, and that's a problem. So to avoid that, I'm not going to make this a hollow bowl like I did in some former ones. I'm going to make it a solid object. So let's grab this outer edge by left-clicking and hitting Alt and left-clicking. All right, let's EZ to bring this up just a little bit. And then let's ES to bring this in just a little bit too. And then let's just fill that. And that'll make a solid object. And then that way everything knows where the normals are pointing. Blender knows it, and then Substance Painter will be able to see it as well. Okay, so let's unwrap this object. As you know, we have to be in edge mode. Let's grab this edge here by Alt left clicking, Shift Alt left click this one, and then we can right click and mark those seams. Okay, that looks pretty fair. Let's see what it did. I'm going to make one cut here, right click, mark seams. A good strategy when you're not sure how to unwrap stuff is to just try to do as little as possible and then see what it looks like. So let's see if this is a good unwrap. Let's hit A to select the entire object, U to unwrap, and this looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go with that. That's perfectly adequate for this project. Okay, so then let's tab into object mode. Let's right click, shade smooth, come down here to our familiar auto smooth section, and 30 degrees looks like it's going to work pretty good for this area. Okay, cool. Let's get rid of that. Alt A, and then let's make the seat. So Shift A, I'm going to add a mesh circle again. I'm going to hit tab to go into edit mode. Number 1 on the top of the keyboard to go into vertex select. And then let's just pick it up and bring it up here. Okay, so the scale of the stool seat. I think in this picture over here, this seat is a little big for the stool. I know this is kind of a shorter squat stool. I don't want it to be this big in relationship to the rest. So it's up to you though what the scale is. So I'm going to go somewhere probably like that. I think that looks pretty good in scale. All right, so let's ES to bring this in. I'm going to bring it in just a little bit, and then I'm just going to fill it. Let's Alt, left click this outer ring, EZ, and we'll just bring it up, something like that, however thick you want your seat to be. And then let's ES, bring it in just a little bit. ES again to bring it in just a little bit here. Let's get a little closer. And then I'm going to use the Z-axis arrow just to pull this down in so there's a little bit of an indentation. ES again into the middle, bring it about here, and then a little more indentation, and then finally let's just fill it. Okay, cool. Let's unwrap. Again, we have to be in edge mode. Let's Alt select this entire ring around the outside, Shift Alt select the bottom ring, right click, mark that seam. Let's grab one right here, right click, mark that seam as well. Okay, so that will probably unwrap pretty good. Let's hit A to select everything, and then let's hit U to unwrap it and see what happens. Okay, so this is a pretty good unwrap. I like it. I'm going to stick with it. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and smooth out our object. So if we hit Tab, right click, Shade Smooth, Auto Smooth, and that looks pretty fair, pretty decent. Now, a piece of this chair is going to show, so let's actually use a bevel on this. So let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. Let's Alt left click this entire edge here, Control B to bevel, and we'll bevel this out just a little bit. Now it has a lot of segments because last time we used it, it's remembering our settings. We had 8 segments. Let's just click it down to where it says 3. Okay, and 3 should be plenty. All right, cool. Let's tab and take a look at it. That looks pretty good. All right, so now we have our stool smooth, our seat smooth and unwrapped. Let's hit Tab, and we're going to select this entire ring around the outside. So first things first, let's go into face mode, and then Alt left click to get that entire ring of faces, and then we're going to duplicate it. Shift D. Now it's duplicated. I'm going to left click, and then we're going to hit the P key, and we're going to separate it by selection. Now if we hit Tab to go into object mode, we can actually work on that piece. To work on it a little easier though, let's get rid of the actual seat part by selecting it, and then let's hit H to hide it. Now we can grab this stool thing, hit Tab around this rim, and then we have this whole thing. Let's A to select the entire thing, and then let's slowly scale it out. I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I scale this out just a little bit bigger. Something like that. And then let's quickly give it a little bit of thickness. So I'm going to hit, with it all selected, we can come over here to our Modifiers tab, Add Modifier, Solidify. And now we can see that it looks like it might be a little too thick. So we can come right in here to our controls under Thickness. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, hover over the number, left click, and move it to the left till it's just a little bit thinner. Something like that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And it's giving me the warning. Of course, you have to be in object mode, so let's tab into object mode. Now we can apply that modifier. Let's hit back into edit mode by hitting Tab, and now let's finish unwrapping this. It looks like it actually did a pretty good job on its own, so let's just see what happened. Let's go U, unwrap, and look, it gave us a pretty fair unwrap up here. I'm happy with that. It's going to work perfect for this project, so let's just go with it. Okay, so then let's tab into object mode, right click, shade smooth, come back over here, make sure that we have our auto smooth on, which in this case it already does because we duplicated this ring of faces from an object that already had this smoothing on it. So it had that automatically applied. So that looks pretty good. Let's hit Alt H and bring back our stool or our seat. Okay, so I'm going to select the seat and I want to bring it up. I'm going to turn on my gizmo. Actually, I'm going to left click it, right click, and then set its origin to geometry. And now we can pick this up. We could have used GZ as usual. I'm going to pick this up just a little bit so we can see more of the seat sticking out. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, in this model, there's these rivets here. I'm not going to put those in for this model. You could if you want. You just do the same process we've been doing, but I think it looks good when it's smooth like this. All right, one last thing before we move on. Let's grab the seat and this rim around the seat, and let's move it down by hitting GZ. And we'll move the whole thing down, and we want this base to be embedded in it. Two things here. Let's make sure that I can see a gap between our bolt, so we have to grab this one, GZ, grab our little bracket, bring it down onto the screw thread. Then we can grab our seat and our rim, and let's get a good view here. In fact, let's just hit 3 on the numpad so we can see better. This will allow us to bring it down perfectly. Let's hit GZ and bring it down so that it's kind of embedded in. I want it to stick out a little bit. I'm going to hold Shift, bring it up just a little bit, something like that. All right, so it looks like we've got our base, our threads going up in there. Everything's looking pretty good. All right, cool. Okay, so this is about where we're going to go with this. In the next segment, we will join this all together into one object. We'll make sure all of its normals are pointed the right way before we do that, and then we'll create an ID mask before we send it into Substance Painter. So I'll see you in the next one.